Welcome, everyone, to Galactic Ambition, a Star Wars Unlimited podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jason, and I went 0-3 this week at locals.
Wow, congratulations, Jason.
Yeah, I thought I wanted to share that with everybody.
That is
not
great.
The best day at the office.
No.
I tried something a little new this week. I tried playing Chewie, kind of like I was talking about. Oh, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. As it turns out, it wasn't very fun. The whole losing part.
Yeah.
The game stuff was good.
We have a friend who played Chewie at locals and also went 0-3. So you guys
we're like kindred spirits.
Yeah, Chewie buddies.
Yeah, Chewie buddies. No, I just kind of had a really bad 2 games against Sabine, which I thought was kind of weird. Normally I feel good about that matchup.
Good matchup.
It was cunning. I don't think the cunning matchup is as good for me.
Okay.
And then I got rolled by Boba twice. Overall, great experience.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10 would do it again. No, I'd do it again with all my friends and all that part. The losing part wasn't so great. But, I wanted to bring some levity to the podcast, after the discussion last week. I wanted to bring everything back down to earth with my somber tale,
Yeah. We had some fun reactions
we did.
to our episode last week.
We really did.
Some fun ones. Some good ones, people understanding the perspective, and everyone's got their own different kind of takes on things. So we of course welcome all the, again, like we like to talk about, passionate Star Wars fans who get passionate about their passions and love to express them in the comments.
More than happy to see everybody's comments and engaging with them, whether they may align with my thoughts or not. It's okay. We are all entitled to our opinion as long as we're civil. I think it was the first time I discovered people could sometimes be not so civil.
Yeah, civility
which was
is
interesting.
Not an assumption that's always safe to make.
And then, it's like you got to take that high road, but then sometimes it's like, I have this keyboard right in front of me.
Yeah.
But I'm not that guy. But I could be that guy. But I'm not that guy. But
Jason had to message me afterwards, like, I really want to say something.
Oh yeah, dude. I was like, I am. I was strongly worded, but it was good that it brought so much discussion to the topic of how, in particular, and I don't want to really retread, but in particular to how local kind of practices were going with allocation of boosters, whether they were doing drafts, making sure we had several people say they're holding it for the local community and making sure it's just available for local nights and pricing. We had some stories of stores jacking prices very high to a point where it kind of turned some players off. So it's very interesting to kind of see that pendulum swing in 2 different directions and see stories around. So I really appreciate everyone sharing their perspective of what's going on. And hopefully we won't have to deal with this as bad in the future, for sure.
Yes, that was the thing. I don't know if we really hit on that in the last topic, but that was something that Jim Cartwright mentioned in particular, that for set 2, we are able to make some adjustments to the print run. Like it was not too late for us to adjust things when we got wind of the direction of things. So, we're hoping set 2 can stay in for maybe we can, I think, ambitiously shoot for 3 weeks this time. Right?
I would and then if it's going well, we just don't say anything.
Yeah, you and I just need to shut up.
We just need to just be like, yep.
Say nothing about the print run.
Say nothing about the print run. But no, I think it was the first time we really kind of had a contentious, not in my idea, not when we were talking about it. I didn't think it was going to be as a contentious of a topic. I thought it'd be something cool to kind of share our thoughts on and what we think and, and stuff. But it was a bit more polarizing of an issue than I thought, but I'm glad that we talked about it. I'm glad that people were able to express their opinions. And again, passionate Star Wars fans, we really appreciate you, and we really appreciate all the discussion that's being brought civilly to the forefront.
I don't want to be the podcast that shies away from approaching topics that have the potential to be polarizing, because if something's polarizing, that means, again, there are people who really, really care about it.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with our position or not, it doesn't matter. It's, we're here to kind of put our thoughts out there, and you are welcome to either take them into consideration or throw them out and roll your face on the keyboard until we really have had it from you. Mm-hmm. That you're welcome to do either end of things.
Yeah. Either way, we appreciate your time and your views and your input.
Yes. Today
Good,
is
bad, or
going to be, I
indifferent?
think, not a polarizing topic.
No.
Today's going to be a fluffy, fun look at the preview cards that we've had from Shadows of the Galaxy, which is, I think, in the top 3 things in my life right now. It's the most exciting thing happening in the coming months. So I cannot wait to get these cards in my hand, and I'm just excited, Jason, to this will be like this will be a podcast where, for people who aren't paying attention at all to spoilers, which I'm sure there'll be a couple of you out there, we are going to be spoiling cards from the set. So when we get to that section, we'll let you know when we're going to start talking about them, and there'll be pictures on the YouTube version of the podcast. So that's where, at that point, you're free to check out, turn the podcast off. I don't want to spoil anything for you if you want to stay unspoiled. If you want to hear our thoughts on some of these cards and where we think they're, like how playable are they and everything, then this is the episode for you to listen to. So
and if you're one of those, like typically me, I'm typically one of those spoiler-free kind of people, but the nature of this, I kind of can't. But if you're like me, if thanks. No, if you're like me in that regard, I really appreciate you at least clocking in for this few minutes with us. We'll talk about something less spoilery, I'm sure, unless something crazy comes up in 2 weeks next time. But yeah, it's really exciting because you and I really are behind on the whole spoiler talk in terms of a podcast group. This is
It's
we kind of had a whole different itinerary.
It's supposed to be the podcast thing. We're just like every episode, like, what's been spoiled? Let's talk about it.
Right. But then let's just talk about something else. And just, and now we're finally getting to it. But it's good because now we have a nice little chunk of them to talk about. And we have mechanics, which I think is exciting more than anything. For me, new mechanics. It's really exciting to see what kind of things are brewing, kind of that design space. So I'm glad we kind of waited a little bit rather than just kind of like tackling spoilers as they come. So I prefer this.
I like this too, because we didn't have what the smuggle mechanic was for a long time. Whatever. It felt like a long time. It was maybe like a week or 2. I don't know. But and now we've gotten to see even some more things about some of the what Mandalorians do in the set. We have a little better understanding of that. So we'll get to talk about that with a little better detail, which will be nice. But before we dig in, before we search the corners of the galaxy for the shadows that hide within them, we're going to just mention really quick how you can support Galactic Ambition and the rest of the Maindeck family of podcasts, and just Maindeck itself. If you really enjoy listening to us, we've had some wonderful comments again. Every time I get those, it just warms my heart. Thank you guys so much for listening and taking the time to let us know your thoughts and how much you do enjoy listening to it. And if you continue to enjoy, you can always do all the engagement things. Leave another comment, like the video, make sure you're subbed, 5-star reviews on iTunes, Spotify, all that jazz. That is super helpful, really helps us grow. Thank you so much for that. And then if you want to think about Maindeck throwing us a little bone monetarily, next time you are shopping for cards on TCG Player, that platform where everyone in the US likes to buy their cards and then complain about how long they take to come in the mail or whatever, you can always do that through our affiliate link, which will send a little kickback towards us. So our affiliate link is down in the description below in the YouTube video, link down there, or you can go to bit.ly/shoptcgs. That's bit.ly/shoptcgs. That'll get you to TCG Player, but via our affiliate link. And then anything you buy will send a kickback to us, which is really cool. So thank you all so much for your support in all those different ways. Now, Jason, where do we begin with our spoilers? What do you think?
Don't we just start at the beginning? Wouldn't that be like the best course of action? Not like the beginning of like everything.
Are you sure? Are you sure? Because that's not what George Lucas did.
No,
we could start.
That's true.
In the middle.
We could start in the middle if we wanted.
No, but you're right. Let's start with
the beginning.
The leaders. Starter deck leaders, right? So 2 starter decks this time. Interestingly, I had totally predicted a while back when they revealed that it was Moff Gideon Mandalorian. I was like, I got this figured out. I got this nailed down. I know exactly what's happening. I was like, okay, so our set 1 starters, it was green, red Vader, and blue yellow Luke. I was like, yep, okay, makes sense. And they had a red and a blue leader. I saw Moff Gideon Mandalorian. I was like, easy. Moff Gideon is a command leader, green leader. And then Mandalorian, obviously a cunning leader, yellow leader. It's like, perfect. I got it nailed down. So it's the new starter heroes are now green and yellow rather than red and blue. And then I was like, and then it makes sense because Moff Gideon, it's got to be like a green blue deck, right? Kind of like that slow, controlling, vigilance, and command. And also, that's an unused color combo from the starter decks. And then Mandalorian, he's out there hunting them down. He's got to be like cunning and aggression, right? Makes sense. And now we got a yellow red deck in there. But they pulled one over on me because Moff Gideon and Mandalorian are both vigilance decks.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. So immediately now I can no longer predict what the starter decks will be because they've already thrown the baby out with the bathwater. The baby Yoda.
Oh,
out with the Yoda, the Dagobah swamp water.
Oh, man.
God, I always have the absolute worst euphemisms.
Yeah, I think like with our strengths, I have that edge. You have all the lore and all the other stuff, but when it comes to like the gimmicks and the stuff, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that's why I do have you here. So let's talk about Moff Gideon and Mandalorian, the leaders headlining our starter decks, because these guys are pretty cool, actually. So starting with Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon is a command villainy leader, imperial and official. I love seeing those. I love seeing both of those traits because there are some strong interactions already with those. He has action, exhaust, attack with a unit that costs 3 or less. If it's attacking a unit, it gets +1/+0 for this attack. Let's just stop there. Jason, let's talk about that. I think this leader is insane.
Oh yeah. I think I've co-signed.
I have heard different opinions. I've heard there are people around the Star Wars Unlimited sphere saying different things. I frankly think this leader is high tier right out the gate. I think this is a powerful leader. And I'll just go ahead into my explanation for why I think that, and I'll let you go ahead and tell me whether you agree or if you think it's for a different reason or whatever. So far in Star Wars Unlimited, I feel like what we've seen develop in this game, this game is a huge tempo game. Okay. It's very much about your action economy, your ability to get value out of your units, because this is a very lethal game. Stuff does not exist for as long as you want it to on the board. It doesn't get to just vibe out there for a long time. Yeah. Like stuff has to be really resilient to exist, and still it's going to die. Okay. So what I like about this ability in particular is that this is ability that is built. This is not an aggro leader straight up, because his action is just to attack with a single unit. You could just do that anyway. If it costs 3 or less, but if it attacks a unit, it gets +1/+0. So the only advantage is attacking units with units to get that +1/+0 buff, which means you're trying to control the game by using your units to take out theirs. That +1/+0 though on a 3 or less, that sounds like it would be very mediocre potentially, but to me that is exactly the sweet spot that you need. We already have leaders like Krennic that are like providing +1/+0 to damaged units. That's already like kind of tricky to use, but actually is really, really good. Because you're basically taking these, I like to think of them as damage thresholds, but you have units that have different amounts of power and HP. HP is typically is often higher than power. It's either the same or higher. It's less common for power to be higher than HP. And that is because stuff needs to have a little more HP so that it can stick around and make decisions interesting. So anytime you have something that buffs power, even just a little bit for free like this, you are suddenly taking a bunch of our known damage thresholds, which I'm thinking like things like a Star Viper can take out an Arc 170 and live, right? And then that Star Viper gets to do 3 more damage to something else in the future, which is where you're getting value out of that card, and sort of like developing tempo by attacking into something before it attacks you, so that it didn't get an attack, but you got the attack and you still get the attack next turn because your thing lived. So we're taking the thresholds and going, okay, actually this 2/3 can now take out the 3/3 before it attacks and get that value. So having that built into Moff Gideon, you have a lot more flexibility now. The units you run, you can run Seasoned Short Trooper in here. And in the early turns, it's still going to attack like it's a 3/3, which means it can attack into Cell Block Guard and take it out. Or, whatever else, right? Or your 4/3s can attack and do 5 HP things. Or, I was like, you're just incrementing those thresholds. And it doesn't work on things higher than 3, but once you get past 3, it tends to be a little more decisive. I think your kills tend to be a little more decisive because you're talking about things that just naturally have higher stats. I think it's not as necessary at that point either, right? So that's why I like that. What do you think?
You pretty much kind of said everything I wanted to say.
I'm sorry.
It's good because I really think that punching up is so powerful.
Yeah.
With these early game units, when you're right, like things are usually typically do have that extra hit point. Usually you want to keep to kind of stick around, right? A card that immediately jumped out for me, especially locally, because play against all time, is Inferno 1.
Yes.
So making that a 3/3 to trade with like the restored ship is great.
Or A-Wings.
Or A-Wings. Yeah, exactly. That's another card. It's just
Inferno 4. Inferno 4 is, I think, I thought it was one of the best 2-drops in the game until I played enough. And then I thought there's just something missing from this card. It seems so good on the surface. But yeah, what's missing is one power.
One power. Yeah.
Literally the one thing missing from the card from making it like bar none the best 2-drop in the game, which I mean, you don't want it to be that way, but you want a leader that makes it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And my strategy right now with that card is I ignore it once it hits the table for a lot of the times because I don't want it to die. I don't want the scry trigger, but it's really not a threatening card. If they want to trade into one of my space units, it's usually 2 hits. I feel pretty okay with that. It's buying enough time. But the ability to just punch up, even for that 1 hit, 1 point of power, cannot be understated. And especially when it comes to action economy, you're not burning like a card from your hand to kind of give an effect like that. You're just simply using your leader ability to kind of get that little extra point. And again, this game is all about tempo and action economy. So what better way to shore that up to make some of these really strong units without that extra punching power get to that next step to trade with kind of like these more vanilla stat units, that might have a little bit more power, but kind of do nothings. And it makes your things with kind of enticing abilities, or cards like Seasoned Short Trooper, which kind of have a early game presence, but a late game use, much better in the early game. So I'm really excited for this card in particular, because I just really like the idea of kind of this control through aggression. Even though it's not an aggressive unit, but you're taking your early game units, which usually give you advantage like Inferno 4 by getting card knowledge, and now you're using them as viable weapons to throw into things, which I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even better. He has epic action. If you control 5 or more resources, he's a 5-flip leader.
That's really good.
Ooh, the 5-flip, as we've seen, in the metagame in general, 5-flip is such a powerful number to be able to flip.
He flips at 5 and he has 6 hit points when he flips, which is another really exciting thing to see.
Yes, out of takedown range, right? That's
it checks all the boxes.
Yep. He is a 3/6 when he deploys with Overwhelm, which is kind of funny because like 3 power with Overwhelm is like, well, whatever. But he has each friendly unit that costs 3 or less gets +1/+0 and gains Overwhelm while attacking an enemy unit. So, and just to be clear, as far as I understand, that is both those benefits are while attacking an enemy unit. So that I think there are multiple ways you can read that. But I
could see how you could kind of say, oh, it has +1/+0, but it also has Overwhelm when I'm attacking. Yep. I think they're dependent. Yeah.
Each friendly unit that costs 3 or less gets +1/+0 and Overwhelm while attacking an enemy unit. That's the read. So that is like his front side ability, but always while he's in play, which is really cool, not just on a single unit. So Moff Gideon is able to build a deck with and have a lot of these 2 and 3 drops, and they are able to. I think punching up was such a good way of putting it. I can't believe I didn't think to say that.
That's why I'm here. Remember?
Yep, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
He gets to continue to punch up with them even into that mid game, where they're going to actually be able to kind of carry their weight a little bit, and into the late game too, because at the point, there's some of these 3 drops that are going to have already 3 or potentially 4 power, or you can always use experience counters, right? Like you can totally run General Tog and troopers in here and like power up some things and get them. Like, honestly, look, if you build Red Moff Gideon, just put your 3/1 Death Star Stormtrooper in here for one.
Yeah.
Like that dude's already punching up at 4 power. He's gonna die to whatever he attacks, but he's gonna take it out too.
He's gonna take something with him for sure. Yep.
And that's not the worst thing in the world. So I'm a huge fan of Moff Gideon. Anything else to say about Giancarlo Esposito's first appearance?
He's done with chicken. That's what it looks like. Done with chicken.
Yep. Let's talk about Mandalorian next. So opposite of Giancarlo Esposito's appearance is the Mandalorian, sworn to the Creed, who is our cunning heroism leader, who has, when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. So also, I should mention, Mandalorian and Bounty Hunter are the traits on this one. So this is a very curious ability. I think it is better than I thought it was right away. But is really built around. I feel like it'll be pretty easy to find the successful builds with Moff Gideon. Mm-hmm. I think Mandalorian, a successful competitive build with it, is going to be a little trickier, but I think it's possible. But I don't immediately have such a strong reaction to his power level. What are your thoughts, Jason?
Kind of the same thing, except that we have a whole set of cards left to see. So that's my other. So it's easier to kind of see for me what Moff Gideon could do at the gate, because we already have, like, it's not as conditional on like the units, right? We already have a large amount of units that we know we could play around this card. As far as upgrades, we have upgrades. Is it worth it for the effect to play with this leader versus what other leaders can typically do without having to rely on all that? I think that we have to see more. I think the ability is really insane, especially when it flips. I'm a big fan of this card, but I'm a big fan of it with the asterisks that I'd like to see more of kind of what upgrades we do get. We do already have some exciting options, but I kind of want to see, like, okay, show me some more things. Show me some more, and especially more of kind of what they've got going on with this Mandalorian tribal that we're going to kind of talk about in a bit anyway.
I think this is really cool and super thematic and really flavorful. I really like this. Like, if you just like Din Djarin as a character and you're like, I just want to play him, I think you will have a total blast playing this deck, whether or not it's competitive, right? That's aside from, whether or not you'd have fun with it. I think, but just from a competitive standpoint, the thing that gets me about Mandalorian compared to Moff Gideon is that Moff Gideon is kind of rewarding you for building a deck with the cards you are already going to put in the deck.
Right.
Whereas Mandalorian's ability inherently is like rewarding you for putting cards that you don't necessarily always put in a deck. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It means that, as you mentioned, the cards that we see that go with this have to kind of carry that part of it. They have to themselves already be worth playing in their own right as upgrades. So then we are rewarded for playing things that are already good to play, just like Moff Gideon. When we get to that stage, then I'll say, okay, Mandalorian competitively good. But I want to mention a couple things with this ability before we go to the flip. When you play an upgrade, does not trigger when you place experience counters on things. That's an important rule to know, because you do not play those. They are just simply placed in. They're not done using a play action, which is normally an action. So this is talking about when you use an action to play an upgrade. Whether that be a nested action or an action on your turn, doesn't matter. But if you play an upgrade, then you get the exhaust. The exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. That is pretty good though. Just as far as what it can hit, that can not only hit a bunch of like, especially earlier in the game, a bunch of just stuff through about the mid game. It can hit kind of anything that gets played, but because it's a remaining HP check, it does allow you to do some pretty cheeky stuff, like get their leader damaged a little bit, so it's got 4 or less remaining, and then just lock it down for the like the rest of the game, so you don't have to deal with it, and you could just mess with their other stuff on board for until you are able to take it out. So Mandalorian and Moff Gideon both kind of like control leaning leaders, which is kind of interesting as well. Neither, I guess that's not unlike Vader and Luke either.
I was going to say, it really kind of feels like Vader and Luke in that regard.
Yeah. Mandalorian does deploy on 6. So the heroism side gets the 1 higher deploy in this starter set. But both are deploying a turn earlier than they did in the Luke and Vader starters. Now, when Mandalorian deploys, this is pretty good.
Yeah, this is way better. Yeah, this is
a good side. So I like this right away. This is kind of cute. He's a 4/7, same stats as Boba, which is cute because they're both wearing Mandalorian armor. And has, when you play an upgrade, not once per turn, just when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, he is now a body to play upgrades on, right? Which is like, yeah, I mean, I like this. I like the turn you flip him and he whips out a gun and
nice.
You exhaust something that was going to attack him.
Yeah.
Like that's probably feels pretty good. And then he gets bigger and then he can attack something and take it out or whatever. Yeah, he's pretty sweet. The thing that's tricky about the leader turn though, Jason, right, is that like the leader flip turn is so deep for you that you usually lose the initiative the turn that you flip your leader. And exhausting the unit so you don't have to deal with it that turn, but then losing the initiative just kind of means that they get to, do something back to you next turn with that unit potentially. So again, it's just like, it's things to keep in mind, things that are just going to be just a little hurdles in figuring out how to max out the power of your Mandalorian deck.
Yeah, and I kind of look at it in the way that the flip turn, I want to try to maximize what I could do in that turn, knowing that I'm probably going to lose that initiative. So is that upgrade that I'm putting on going to be worth it? Like snapshot reflexes. It's a really good example of an upgrade I want to put on, because then I could slam that on, get an exhaust, and I also get to punch in. And again, action economy is really big. Yeah. So when I could do 2 things at once, I'm willing to lose kind of like that initiative turn if what I put in was meaningful enough to go, okay, you know what, you could have first crack next turn. So I like kind of navigating that, but I do agree that the ability becomes super, super juicy now that we're talking 6. We're hitting a lot of viable targets through most of the game, and it's very easy to get people or units to that threshold anyway. And I like the idea of putting most leaders on timeout as well, just kind of in perpetuum if you can keep Mando alive.
Yes, absolutely. It's probably worth showing off a couple of their like headlining cards from the starter deck too, because I think it helps you make a little sense also of what you're going to be doing with, I think especially with Mandalorian. I'd feel bad if I didn't show the Mandalorian's rifle. This is an example of a card that you probably do want to put in here to really make him work, especially on that flip turn. So the Mandalorian's rifle is a 3-cost heroism only upgrade item weapon with attached to a friendly non-vehicle unit. It gives +3 power and +0 HP. So when you attach it to Mandalorian, it does turn him into a 7/7, which, I mean, feels good. And has, when played, if attached unit is the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. And this is going to get into our first mechanic as well to talk about here. So it's kind of I kind of wanted to throw it in here as kind of like a perfect segue, I feel like. So capturing. This allows you to capture a unit. When you capture units, a new thing in Shadows of the Galaxy where the unit gets you, your opponent gives you the unit you captured, and you put it face down underneath the unit that captured him until the unit that captured him is and so there's an interesting thing in the rules here where it says until he leaves play. There's a technicality with leaders in that they don't actually leave play. I think this was just a slight like miswording on the card where I think it needs to say leaves the arena or leaves play or should say leaves play or returns to the leader zone or it's actually technically the base zone, I think, is where your leader is too. Whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is, I believe they'll have a clarification in the rules for this card that it works when the Mandalorian leaves play. It doesn't permanently capture the thing. However, if that is the clarification, instead, this card just got really
it's
powerful.
much better. Yeah.
It's way too busted then in that case, I think. But okay, I also want to mention too, just so people understand how this part works, when you play an upgrade and when played are the same timing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you place the Mandalorian's rifle on the Mandalorian, it is your choice which of those two things you resolve first. And often you will probably choose to resolve the when you play an upgrade on the Mandalorian card himself to exhaust the unit that you then intend to capture with the rifle, because it captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. But you can resolve them in whatever order you want, to be fair. Okay, so Jason, what do you think about the Mandalorian's rifle?
It's really good. I like that it gives you, when it's on Mando, a nice solid 7/7 for 3 is really good. With getting a unit completely out of the way for as long as Mando's in play, I think is awesome. I'm a big fan of stuff like that. Your ossifications and stuff like that in the world. I'm big on those kind of cards, so that really excites me. And I also like the idea that on some games, I think that you could take one unit, exhaust another, and it kind of stops you can do that to kind of stop the bleeding. Let's say you're taking a lot of, you're kind of having trouble getting through that mid game. Taking out 2 units on one turn can be very powerful. Instead of just kind of, tapping down one and taking it. So there's applications with that. And the fact that it does, I was worried when I saw this card because I was told about its ability before I saw the card. I was worried it was going to be like +1/+0 because I was hearing this ability. I'm like, this is really good.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a really strong ability. And I was worried that it was just going to kind of be like a paltry little power buff. So the fact that it kind of gives a nice chunk of power on whatever you put on it. I mean, there's going to be games where, Mando got shot down or anything like that, and you haven't hit your Legend Mando, which we'll talk about in a bit, that you're just going to want to put this on a unit early for pressure. And I think 3 for 3 power is not a bad rate.
No, it's not bad for sure. We do surprise strike happily to pay 2 to get +3 for the turn.
Right.
And paying 1 more to get an upgrade with +3 that also captures something that turn is like, even if they end up getting the thing back, it's important to know too, the captured card does not return to play. It doesn't trigger it's not like played again.
Right.
When the captured unit is rescued through whatever means, it simply changes sides and flips back over. But it won't, you won't get penalized basically if you capture your opponent's like Emperor Palpatine and then they capture, they don't get to go, oh, I get to blast the board again.
Right.
Yeah. That would make capture a lot worse. So they did do some things when they designed this mechanic that I think ensure it's pretty playable. And I think this card in general is like actually just a really sweet, like mono heroism removal for Mandalorian, which I think is good too, because it means that you can build your Mandalorian deck as Cunning Vigilance, just like the starter deck. And I don't think you'd hate that, because doing things like putting shields on the Mandalorian after you've captured something with them is like, leaders are tough to deal with.
Yeah.
Putting shields on them is like, oof, I mean, what can you even do about it? But you also can build, like, I can imagine mono Cunning Mandalorian being really cool. You mentioned earlier snapshot reflexes, which They seeded that in set 1 with the picture of Mandalorian on it.
Yep. So nice little Easter egg for us, I think.
Yep, but it goes great in there. But then you get access to like 4-cost cunning. What I think in this deck is like you're trying to find ways to, after you capture stuff, to make sure it doesn't get rescued.
Right.
Waylay and Cunning are both great cards to just like bounce stuff on board, exhaust things that are going to attack to buy you a little time to capture something else. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some flexibility there in how you build him as well. Let's talk about the second mechanic that goes along with captured in an interesting way. Let's talk about bounties. Shall we?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's start with a really basic bounty. Let's talk about Wanted.
Yeah.
Wanted is a card that also goes along with the Mandalorian's theme of playing upgrades. Wanted is a 0-cost, cunning only, upgrade bounty condition with +0/+0. Okay. It says attached unit gains bounty, ready to friendly resources. So what bounty means is when the unit with the bounty attached to them is defeated or captured, its opponent collects the bounty. So Wanted is not a card you put on your own things.
No.
Just to be clear. You want to put it on your opponent's things, but this will allow you then to, when that thing would be defeated or captured, you would then get to collect the bounty, which is then you would get to ready 2 resources again. So basically for 0, you're getting the card play, which can be relevant for things like Vanguard Ace to get extra like counters on or whatever. And you're basically going to turn that 0, that card play into, and no resource expenditure, into like putting it on something you were going to take out anyway, and then getting to ready 2 resources to get a little bit more of an explosive turn. And that can sound like it's not a lot to people, but then again, you remember how good Boba Fett is.
Yeah.
So it can't be that bad. So Jason, thoughts on Bounty and Wanted?
Really, so Bounty for me as just a card game player, I love the idea of cards like this. Cards that are, as we discuss Bounty further, that do something for, rewarding or penalizing a player. In this instance, you're rewarded. And I actually just like that it's no resources for Mandalorian, obviously. So you also get a trigger on Mandalorian's ability, which I think is great. And obviously, readying 2 resources again. We know how good Boba is, and we don't have to. It doesn't need to be the same turn. You can put that there and bank it for later, or you could force your opponent into a weird situation like, well, maybe I need to make this trade now because them readying 2 resources now, or their resources are already. It kind of puts your opponent in a really weird spot in certain situations, I think, and I really like that kind of mind game. Overall, I am really excited for Bounty, especially as we discuss the other Bounty cards. Wanted for me is okay. I immediately just want to play at Mandalorian and just see how it'll work out, because again, you automatically get an ability on triggers on both sides, which I think is great.
I think you pointed out something that I haven't thought about too deeply with Wanted. My initial take on Wanted is very, very mid. Mm-hmm. Because like the 2 resource readying is obviously cool, but it does cost a card. And cards, as we talked in the last episode too, cards get so tight that it's tough to want to do that. However, I like this idea of my opponent has a unit in play. They're obviously going to, like, my opponent's been playing kind of to control my board, like Moff Gideon is. And so they're obviously going to try to attack into my stuff and probably like trade their unit for mine. So I'm just going to go ahead and give that thing Wanted now. And now they're going to go like,
now it's not so much on their terms anymore, which I really like.
I don't really want to attack your thing with this thing anymore because it's going to die, and then you're going to get to ready them. And like, so there, I think it's a very cunning card. It's like,
oh, absolutely.
If you know how to apply this, then the advantage is massive. If you apply it willy-nilly, it's probably going to feel like a pretty bad card. So I think it just depends. But I want to talk about a bounty card that, well, I guess it's the same way, in that, like, if you know how to apply this, it's certainly going to be a lot better. But this is I think, been a very controversial card since as soon as it was spoiled, which is just a few days ago, actually, as we're recording this. Dr. Evazan, wanted on 12 systems. So this is a rare in the set, 2 cost, cunning and villainy, 3/3. Okay, so it's a battlefield marine, Dan. Who cares? Shielded.
Which,
power creep. No, hang on.
Oh my god.
Hang on. Bounty right on the card as a drawback. Ready up to 12 resources when he's defeated or captured. Which is cool because he's wanted on 12 systems.
Yeah.
If for people who don't know, if you're like, if you just play the game, you don't know much about Star Wars.
If you're me,
if you're Jason, did you know who this guy was at all?
No. Okay. I just thought he looks very nice.
He looks lovely.
Yeah, he looks lovely.
Dr. Evazan is the guy in the cantina in A New Hope who Luke accidentally sits next to his friend Ponda Baba. He's the guy with the butt chin in the background in the artwork here. He sits next to him. Ponda Baba doesn't like that at all. Gets kind of mad at him. And Dr. Evazan is the guy who leans over and says, "My friend doesn't like you." And then Luke like writes it off or whatever. And he goes, "I don't like you either." And like basically tells him it's a big deal because he's a dangerous man and he's wanted on 12 systems. And that's what ends up with Obi-Wan pulling out the lightsaber and chopping off Ponda Baba's arm. So that's Dr. Evazan. He's great. He's the Doctor of Death. There's as you can imagine, there's way more lore than you would ever even care to know about this dude from the expanded universe. But yeah, that's Dr. Evazan. Now, let's talk about this card. 3/3 Underworld, shielded, bounty for 2. Jason, with that bounty to ready 12 resources, but on a 3/3 shielded, is this card playable?
I'm crazy enough to play it. I'm not gonna lie. I really like it. First off, Battlefield Marine is a great place to start. Stat-wise. Like, I'm really okay with that. Shielded is very powerful. It allows me to do a lot of tricksy things with my units. It makes them harder to deal with. And again, if I can ensure the bounty goes off on my terms versus my opponent's terms, then there's no real downside to this card. If I can slam him into something or get a favorable trade, get enough damage out of him, and let's say their resources are already ready and I had initiative and I used his shield, I got my damage, and I guess I'm going to run it into this thing. Go ahead and ready 12 resources. You know, when I think of a card like this in that way, I immediately think of the upside. Obviously, as the game progresses, my likelihood to want to put this card into play wanes, substantially. But I do think when I'm looking at stat lines and I'm looking at aggressive units and just kind of, trying to get some pressure or maybe favorable trades, and, taking advantage of that shield, having shielded is just huge on a 2-drop unit. We've already kind of seen that. So yes. I'm all about this card, whether I'll take the bad with the, I think, very good, in my opinion.
I'm torn. I'm a little torn because obviously, like, stat wise, he's insane. He's the best statted thing for 2 cost, period. Just generally, the ability to control when that bounty is triggered is not always there because your opponent is playing the same game as you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a pretty, as we were just talking about with Boba Fett, right? Like, that is a pretty massive reward if the opponent is able to play around it. Now, they may not have the right tools. They may have to play tools in a weird way that they're not happy with in order to play around it. But when playing around it consists of, I played shoot first on Sabine and, it killed it because Sabine's trigger took out the shield and then she did 3 damage to it and she didn't even die. And then I readied 12 resources. So for some decks, that's not very hard to do.
Sure.
We have a sideboard in this game. That's an important part of this, though.
Mm-hmm.
And if the opponent has more tools to be able to, if like your opponent's playing Mandalorian, capture.deck, like,
yeah, he just bored him out.
Because that shield is not doing anything to stop him from being captured. It's only, again, I have to say this just because people have rules questions all the time. Shield only stops damage. Only stops damage. Does it stop? No. Only damage. That's it. Doesn't stop capture. Doesn't stop vanquish. Doesn't stop takedown. Like, will your opponent on turn 4 or something vanquish Evazan just to get him off the board and then ready all their resources so they didn't even spend anything on vanquish? That'll happen.
Yeah.
You did get them to vanquish a 2-drop.
They vanquished my 2-drop, which can't feel that bad. So, I mean, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think thematically this is incredible. This card is amazing. Sure. Like, you feel like you're playing a wanted man. You're like, this is dangerous for him to be out here in the open, but he's probably good. I am very cautious about it. And I have to see what else, like if capture.deck is like the big deck in the format, I don't think he's going anywhere. So it'll really depend on seeing some other stuff here, but is an interesting card. I will think about it with every deck I build. I'm sure that's in cunning and villain.
Yeah, I'm all about it, but again, I think I definitely can see the risk, but I'm okay with it. And then again, we have a sideboard for a reason. I'll just board him out for something probably way better in those matchups, I hope anyway.
Yeah. And just, sorry, did you have something to add?
No.
Okay. Perfect. Just one more note on like the idea of capturing and bounties before we move on to, I think, the mechanic that you and I are most excited to talk about.
Yes.
I just want to toss out here Unexpected Escape just to show off a little bit of other stuff that we're going to see related to this whole, like, because in Shadows of the Galaxy, of course, we're going to have lots of things that want to capture things. Bounty hunters want to bounty hunt. Unexpected Escape shows us a way that you can manipulate these captured units a little bit. It's a 1-cost vigilance trick that says exhaust a unit. You may rescue a captured unit guarded by that unit. And guarded by is, by the way, the specific game term for when something captures something, it is now guarding it. It's designated to guard it. I just like to point this out. I don't think this card is insane or anything. It's just kind of it's a role player in limited. I think it does it in limited with capturing stuff. You're going to want ways to uncapture them.
Yeah.
So that's
I think it's interesting that exhaust is kind of bled into the vigilance color pie a bit. Yeah. I think that's kind of cool. Like just from a color pie standpoint.
I bet we'll see exhaust a little more. I bet it's going to be like sort of a tertiary thing in vigilance or whatever. I guess it's good. It's obviously it's main and it's the primary thing in cunning. Vigilance. It's probably secondary in vigilance then.
Makes sense.
I would guess. But yeah, I want to point that out because just so people don't get confused when they see it on other cards. But yeah, it's going to be fun to see what. And
I think there'll be more cards that definitely rescue cards for sure.
Definitely. Okay, so we have capture, we have bounty, we have rescue as just sort of like an extra thing in there. Now we have smuggle. I love how thematically these are all very just like, smugglers and bounty hunters and the Shadows of the Galaxy. Smuggle is such a cool mechanic though, Jason.
Oh yeah.
So let's see. We're gonna toss up Timely Intervention. That'll be the one that you're looking at right now.
There you go. Yeah.
Because this is I think a pretty good smuggle card. This Timely Intervention is a 1-cost command tactic that has event card that has play a unit from your hand, give it ambush for this phase. Have you guys ever heard that text before? I'm sure that's totally new text to you. It is not just ECL, but without the 6-cost limit. But it costs 1 and it does cost a card from your hand. So I mean, like right away, it's like, oh no, more ECL. Well, this is different. It's different. But it has smuggle. Smuggle, 2-cost, and then it's got the command symbol. So what smuggle says is if this card is a resource, you may play it from the resource zone for its smuggle cost, and then you replace it with the top card of your deck. I was so excited to see this, Jason, because this is the design space I want to see explored in this game. It plays out of your resource row. So people have been asking since in our how to play video constantly, like, can you get those resource cards back ever? Well, you can't normally. I always would say through card effects. Well, this is one of them.
Yeah.
Now you can resource this timely intervention early on. Late in the game, if you need an ambush right now, you can actually exhaust the timely intervention and then one other resource to pay the 2 cost to then reveal it from your resources, play the effect, and then replace it with the top card of your deck. And again, the top card will go in as a resource, which means anytime a resource is played, it comes in exhausted. So it'll come in exhausted then too. So that's typically how you'll play this out. And then you got the effect for free, basically, because you did not go down on resources at all. You got to get the resource from it and get the effect, which is kind of like it's like a pseudo +1 on all the cards with Smuggle, and to compensate, they have a higher cost. Jason, go off on Smuggle.
Oh yeah, this card's cracked. This card immediately scares me a little bit because I think it's really powerful. Even as just a card that you can cast from our hand. Yes, it's a card from our hand, but that's okay. Especially when we like to think of cards we either ambush, and I think the cards I like to ambush in 2 distinct categories. Super Laser Technician is category 1. And then my fireballs, my kill spells are on the other one. Things I like to just come in and be kill spells. So I'm okay with the card from my hand. But the implication of that, it's always a card you have, and it's card positive because it replaces itself. You're not playing it from your hand. I mean, there's so many things I like about this card. And something I wanted to add, because the Versus players I know were really excited about this mechanic, because it's very similar to a mechanic in Versus.
Yeah, I heard about that too.
But the big thing we got is we don't have to play this card. We don't have to replace the resource from a card from our hand. We just get to take the next card off the top of our deck, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's correct.
I can't say enough good things about this card. I just think that Smuggle is the perfect mechanic for me as a player, and I think overwhelmingly so, everyone has really enjoyed what the mechanic brings so far. I don't think people are excited that we have another kind of ECL light kind of card. I don't know about that, but in general, Smuggle is so insanely hype, and this card in particular is obviously going to see a ton of play.
I think this and the other one I'm going to show here, I think, are the 2 best Smuggle cards that we've seen so far. I think it's important to mention too, before I go to the next card, just that Smuggle is also a really cool mechanic with Han Solo leader. It's like,
really, dope. Really cool. Yeah.
Because he'll just put in free resources from the top of your deck or from your hand, and you'll be like, oh, actually, you know what? I'm also going to get the effect on this turn, get a little value from that. You'll still have to destroy a resource later, but it replaces itself, so it's not a big deal. So it's cute. It's cute how that works. I love it. Okay. Hotshot DL44 Blaster. So this is not Han's specific DL44, which I think might be modified. I think it's a modified DL44. But this is just your generic kind of stock. If you go to the Star Wars Blaster store, you buy a Hotshot DL44 Blaster from them. It is a 1-cost aggression upgrade item weapon. It is an upgrade. So now immediately when we hear upgrades now, we got to think Mandalorian. That's the thing you can do too.
Sure.
Attached to a non-vehicle unit, give it +2 power and +0 HP. Smuggle, 3-cost cunning symbol, not aggression, cunning symbol, which is really neat because that means you can smuggle it in cunning decks even if you don't play aggression. You could smuggle this in Mandalorian decks that are playing cunning vigilance.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to play it off aspect for 3, you can, or if you wanted to smuggle, well, you might as well smuggle it then because it costs 3.
Yeah, same thing.
And same thing, except it doesn't cost a card from your hand because it replaces itself.
And you get the smuggle trigger.
And you get the smuggle trigger. It says, when played using smuggle, attack with attached unit is now a snapshot reflexes, but with +1 more attack.
Yeah, pretty reasonable. I think the thing that excites me the most is that we're seeing it go off color.
Yeah.
That is so cool. That design space alone is really exciting because, again, it's like these non-aggression decks may still play it because the return rate, again, you kind of nailed it. It costs the same thing. It's just now you get an extra bonus off it. So if you feel like you would play a Snapshot Reflexes for 3 or Snapshot Reflexes on demand for 3, which I think is important. It's not just, oh, I drew this. It's I've had this.
Yeah.
Now is a good time to use it. A card like Snapshot Reflexes is okay, but a card like Snapshot Reflexes that I get to choose the terms of, that it's just I've kind of banked on it. It's not a card that I drew that I'm like agonizing if I'm going to resource it or not. I have no problem resourcing this card, busting it out later for maybe a favorable trade or sneaky base damage to kind of steal a game. So it's really cool.
I can't stress. There are two big advantages to Smuggle that I want people to really think about when they're analyzing these cards. The one is that like there is a pseudo card advantage to using these again because you put the card down into your resources. It doesn't ever you don't ever lose a resource to play it again, but you still get to play it because you get the resource back. So it's every card that has this is like, well, I because I saw people when this is spoiled, like why would I play this over Snapshot Reflexes because it costs more or whatever. Like, but this is that plus a card, like plus a free card.
You get more flexibility, way more flexibility.
But the other advantage that is really, I think, really cool is what you were talking about, Jason. I just want to hammer that in because this idea that you're going to have cards that you draw in your deck all the time, like Snapshot Reflex. You might be playing Snapshot Reflexes in a deck right now. And sometimes in the game, early in the game, you'll draw Snapshot and be like, I need to keep these cards more. These cards are more important. I need to have my Spark of Rebellion right now. And, I can't lose. I have to have my 2-drop, my 3-drop. I can't lose that. So I'm going to resource my Snapshot Reflexes. And then it's gone. But it's not only that extra card when you play it, it's like holding that extra card in your hand the entire game. It feels like a little bit because you always have access to that thing by putting it in your resources. Whatever you smuggle card you have in your resources, they're pseudo in your hand still. And we were talking last episode about the power of discard right now. And I'm by the way, I still think discard is a little underplayed. Mm-hmm. Watching some of the results from recent tournaments, like I think people need to be jamming more Spark of Rebellions in decks, but that's not what we're talking about today. But I think that this kind of mechanic is going to be huge for not getting blown out by discard, because if people haven't caught onto it by set 2, they will. They will by the release of set 2, I'm sure. Start to be dumping hands as a way of dealing with decks, and having Smuggle as a resource to get out of that, to have stuff to play, I think it's going to be big.
Yeah, I agree. My main game, obviously, as I've talked about, is Final Fantasy. We just got a mechanic where Limit Break, where we're playing cards outside of the game, but they're always in our hand. We have an 8-card Limit Break deck. That alone has kind of warped the power of the game. And now, after being in it for even just a few weeks, always having something is huge. It's just huge. It could be as generic can be, but you could always have it. It's important to know that you just kind of have something to lean on. And again, that Smuggle ability is really strong. You can do a lot with that. You can take out a unit with that extra power pump. You can do a cheeky, maybe even sneak a kill in on a base if, get that kind of cool, really cool kill you can talk about with all your friends, stuff like that. I love cheeky stuff like this. So, this card's awesome to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think both of these are very playable Smuggle cards. They showed a few others that are, like you said, they're more like generic units. They may be more used in draft. They may.
I definitely think the Privateer crew feels like a draft all-star, but I think it will definitely, I wish I had a better keyword, like a better typing,
better trait.
Yeah, better trait. If I had a better trait, but so far what we've seen, I think these are definitely the two really relevant Smuggle cards so far. But very exciting mechanic.
Yes. And I think I just wanted to leave us on a thematic note today. So those are the 3 new mechanics that are coming out, and we kind of went over the leaders we saw and general thoughts. There are a ton of cards. We're not going to go through every single one here, and there are a lot of really good cards. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the other themes that we get to see in here. In particular, I think the thing that we're going to talk about today, because we'll have other episodes to talk about the other ones, is going to be this Mandalorian theme that we see in here. Not only just the Mandalorian, but also Mandalorian tribal, kindred, whatever term you want to use right now. And I think this is really exciting because, first of all, like, everybody loves Mandalorians. How do you not love the Mandalorians? They look cool. They have weird religious cult tendencies. Like, that's awesome. We all love that.
Yeah, we love cults.
We love cults. They have guns, and guns are cool.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
They protect little babies. That's
Speaking
dope.
of the little baby, we really should, before we get too much further into this, I don't think we have to talk about the one little baby in particular. I think going to be format all-star staple card. I will go as far as say Grogu's a house.
Grogu Irresistible is a 2-cost cunning heroism 0/5 force unit with action. Exhaust him to exhaust an enemy unit. Yeah, this is 5 HP on a 2-drop with an action that can exhaust anything.
Just whatever.
Just any unit. Oh, I took initiative. Okay, exhaust your home one.
Yeah,
like, exhaust your leader.
Yeah.
No, you're not actually going to attack with your leader until you take initiative again or deal with Grogu. And he's hard to deal with. Grogu Irresistible is a pretty crazy card. I'm gonna mention it right now. This is probably the only time I'm ever gonna mention this, other than maybe memeing on it. But yes, he has 4 fingers in the artwork.
Yep,
that's one too many fingers. Someone screwed up.
I think plenty of other people have had plenty of other great discussions about that. I just want to talk about how baller this card is.
Yeah. I don't know what to say other than that, though. Like, he's really good, right? Like, we're talking, you can build your cunning control decks, you jam them in, exhaust things down all the time. He can exhaust something for Mandalorian to then capture, which is cool.
What I really like is that he says force on him for 2. That's, you can do so much stuff just off that alone.
Force throw.
Obviously, you and I are huge force throw gamers.
Yes.
And enthusiast. So that enables it now in kind of a cunning shell, actually. Cunning aggression shells, which I wouldn't really have kind of explored before with that card. So that really excites me. Also, having 5 hit points, I think, is really insane for 2. Because it could take a little bit. Obviously, who wants to hit a child? Like, we don't condone that here.
No,
but if you were hitting this child, it's durable, at 5 hit points. And that's what we want. If we're going to, abuse cute, children, we want them to be durable in our card games, card games.
All right. Wow. Okay.
No, but we just want, it's just, it's going to be very annoying. People are going to be very upset when this card is played against them because they're going to have to use something on it to get it off the board. Yeah. And you're just investing 2 resources into this card.
You're like, this is going to be the most begrudging takedown you will ever see anybody do.
You know that, like, Sarah McLachlan in the Arms of the Angel commercials, all the sad cats and stuff. Do you remember that?
I do. Of course I
do. It's like, it's going to be like that. It wake me up at like 3 a.m. I'm like, why and then you just like start crying. But yeah, kind of like that.
Yep, it is gonna be like that. Let me give you a slightly deeper take in the metagame that I think there's potential to see with this card, because Grogu seems like, right now, if Grogu exists in the Spark of Rebellion format, that would just be wild. I mean, I think that would wildly change the performance of certain decks right now, massively. But I think in the set 2 metagame, we're going to get some pretty powerful more powerful ambush options with like timely intervention, which, by the way, ambushing Grogu is about the highest value ambush you can get because you're going to take nothing back.
Yeah.
He's just going to take him out. He's just gone. Done. You're also going to get capture options. And Grogu, what a capture target, because he
Yeah.
exhausts himself. If you're using something like Mandalorian's rifle to capture him, you're just like, okay, cool. Yep, you got your exhaust. Congratulations. I would like the baby, and you take the baby.
Dang.
And then he's gone. I think there are going to be things like that. It's easy to get lost in the like, what if he existed right now? But there are going to be a bunch of things that I think are going to deal with him. We haven't even begun to see the new like vigilance removal options and stuff.
We have to think, that's, you make a good point, because we're thinking about it kind of in a vacuum, right? We're like, oh my gosh. Obviously, they've already printed cards that kind of effectively deal with it, and we've already kind of seen cards, that are going to kind of mess with it. So again, very powerful. It does what it says on the tin, right? Like it's going to be extremely powerful. It has a relevant trait. Which leads to some very exciting deck building avenues. But again, it's not going to be an end all be all. I'm just really excited to play this card. I'm not really excited to play against it, but that's definitely going to happen, I think.
That's the way icy manipulators go.
So so you can go ahead back to your tribal Mandalorian talk, but we couldn't.
Well, I'm actually going to segue perfectly, because I want to start with a Mandalorian that you will want to play if you want to protect your Grogu.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, the Mandalorian. But this is our first legendary in the set. The Mandalorian, wherever I go, he goes, which is an awesome tagline on him.
Mm-hmm.
6 cost, vigilance, heroism, legendary unit, Mandalorian bounty hunter, 5 power, 6 HP, sentinel. Okay, so we got a little Obi-Wan action here.
Sure,
6 cost sentinel.
Like that.
Obi-Wan is only a 4 power. He's a 5 power. It's kind of cool. When played, you may heal all damage from a unit that costs 2 or less and give 2 shield tokens to it. It's like, no, Grogu is not going anywhere. Absolutely not. Other 2 cost units you can play, though. I mean, there are going to potentially be some other interesting ones that you might want to put more shields on. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I don't think you'll ever see this with Dr. Evazan, but but I did think about that.
What if?
I was like,
Guardian of Wills is a really good kind of example, because it's something that you like to Voltron up anyway. So if you kind of put a little bit of investment into it, Mandalorian will obviously kind of shore that up, make it a little bit harder to deal with on something that could have already kind of, maybe have a little bit of experience on it, or, Jedi lightsaber, etc.
Yep.
So and then obviously, the little man in the picture,
the little man.
First off, that's got to be my favorite art so far. It's so cute.
It's the little Grogu. They're so adorable.
Oh my God. When I saw it, I about lost my mind. I also like our return rate on our stats. Like, this is definitely a reasonable card. Like,
yes.
I really like a 5. Like, Obi-Wan has a really good, trigger, a death trigger, obviously, or defeated trigger. That's great. But 4 sometimes is really like, I'm like, ugh.
It's not quite there, but
it's 5 not quite there. But 5 is definitely a nicer number to see. They have to run through it first to even get to your shielded unit. So we really kind of like that in terms of that, if it's a ground unit. And yeah, I just think it's a very solid card. A lot of people were kind of underwhelmed when they saw this card, which I could get, right? Because it isn't super flashy.
It's not Luke Skywalker. It's not Darth Vader.
Like, oh my God, but it's definitely a very strong, very solid card. And it's definitely going to see some meaningful play.
I think the 2 shield tokens, when people play against that, they'll start to change their mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting interaction that people might not have thought of. There is already a 2 cost Mandalorian in set 1, which is Sabine Wren.
Mm-hmm.
Sabine Wren is already a 2 cost Mandalorian who is a 2/3 that attacks like a 3/3, or can deal damage to base. And putting shield tokens on her will let her just kind of go to town for a while.
Yeah.
And so if you choose to build like a vigilance aggression Mandalorian themed deck, you may enjoy that, because we have some other cool Mandalorian themed cards. Turns out the Mandalorians, the race that are all about armoring themselves up and weaponing themselves up, they have a theme based on upgrades.
Yeah.
So Follower of the Way is another 2-cost Mandalorian that can go along with your Sabine Wrens in this deck. That is a 1/3 for 2 just in Vigilance. So you can actually play him in villainy decks too. While this unit is upgraded, which shield counters again are upgrades, it gets +1/+1. So at the very least, you can drop your legendary Mandalorian to shield up your little Follower of the Way, make him a 2/4 with 2 shields, which is kind of annoying. Not like great, but kind of annoying.
Right. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine, but I mean, as far as a 2-cost 1/3 that becomes a 2-cost 2/4 is like a pretty reasonable rate.
Mm-hmm.
As long as our upgrades are decent. So if you're doing like the cunning build, you have like snapshot reflexes, this guy, like that's suddenly like, that's kind of like, that's getting to the point where it's pretty annoying to deal with.
Yeah. That's a 5 at that point, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's pretty strong.
You can also use our Hotshot DL44. You can smuggle it in the cunning deck or put it in the aggression deck with Sabine. And make the guy a, what are we at now? Make him a 4/4, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Make him a 4/4 that you can potentially attack with if you do the smuggle route. That's good. I think that at that stage, I'm like, yeah, I like this. That's a turn. Wow. That's you see me real time doing this too.
Yeah. Wow.
You resource the DL44 turn 1. Then you Follower of the Way. Then turn 2, you smuggle the DL44 out onto the Follower of the Way, kill whatever they played with your new 4/4 and get the resource back.
Pretty good.
That's like, I think that's a legit sequence in like a cunning vigilance Mandalorian deck.
I think that this card, when I first saw it, I was kind of underwhelmed. Like, that stat line is not great. But for plays kind of like you outlined, it's definitely a really solid card, especially as we see more cards. I think we are going to see more cards that might. I'm kind of hoping for a Mandalorian that like anthems each of your upgraded units.
Yeah.
Or something like that. That's kind of like my pipe dream of kind of like what we're going with that tribe. And I just think
that's like the armor probably like puts experience counters on your Mandalorians or something.
Yeah, something like that, right? You know,
builds them all up.
I think that cards like Follower of the Way, I think with the right build are obviously going to be very strong. Again, this card is going to feel bad when you draw this in your opener and you like see nothing for like 2 turns to like interact with this card. The good news is your opponent is probably just not going to interact with it in any meaningful way. They're like, yeah, I guess you can hit me for 1. So hopefully you can draw something. But yeah, I definitely see that they're definitely following that upgrade kind of theme. So hopefully we get some more ammo for that because there is some potential there. And like you said, that sequence does seem like an actual like constructed viable play where it feels pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like that sequence is good. I also think I still think one of the most underrated cards from set 1, The Force is With Me, is like a pretty functional. Yeah, it is a house, but you know that because you've been playing.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah,
it's still a pretty functional play on here. Giving it 2 experience counters will bring it up to a 4/6.
Pretty good.
If my math is not failing me,
yeah, sure.
And then it can attack. If you had a force unit too, you would also give it a shield. It doesn't have to be a force unit.
Right.
I think people forget that you don't have to put this on a force unit. You just have to have.
I've done that. Unit. And my opponent's like, that's not how that card works. I'm like, actually, it is.
It is.
I mean, typically you put it on the force unit because, but at the same time, you don't have to. So yeah, that's a pretty good play too.
When we get our Darksaber wielding Mandalorian Jedis, perhaps then that'll all line up together. We're going to talk about one more card. One more card. This is the last card, but this is just going to hammer home because we're just talking about Mandalorians in this particular podcast. This is the way. 2-cost heroism event with the Mandalorian tagline, which is really important to note that this is already a Mandalorian card. Search the top 8 cards of your deck for up to 2 Mandalorian and or upgrade cards, reveal them, and draw them. I think this is one of the most potent numbers-wise card draw cards we have seen in the game. Yeah. I think it's the most potent, like if most efficient and effective card draw cards that we've seen. Its selection between a huge amount of things. If you're built, I mean, obviously you have to build the Mandalorian deck, but upgrades and Mandalorians, exactly what you want to find. 8 cards is a ton of cards. 2 costs for 2 cards is also like above rate by far.
Way above. So like obviously we have Vader, but I'm thinking of other cards. The starter Tarkin is like a card that comes to mind. And yeah, you get a unit for that, but you don't even get Dig as Deep. This card replaces itself and then some. And you can play it as early as turn 1. I think that's
the big thing for me.
That really is for me. Like
tempo.
Playing this on turn 1 is an acceptable play, like tempo play, and it also won't feel bad playing later because of the rate of return. Obviously, the further the game goes, a little bit dicier a card like this is because, again, action economy is a big deal. But I think the rate of return on this card, you probably are going to get 2 cards a fair amount of the time, I would say, especially if you construct the deck in a way where you're going to draw 2 cards most of the time.
The fact that it itself is Mandalorian, so that it's not going to interrupt itself. You can, if at the very least, you can. This is the way for like another copy of This Is the Way and like a Hotshot blaster or something. You'd be like, whatever, that wasn't the worst.
Yeah,
you know. That's I think this is a pretty cool card. This scene, when I saw this, I got excited. I was like, okay, like Mandalorian Tribal is sounding really cool. Like you could build Cunning, Vigilance, Mandalorian Tribal with the Mandalorian himself. You jam in his rifle, This Is the Way, the Hotshot blaster that you only intend to smuggle, the Follower. Like if you literally just jam all the current Mandalorian cards from set 2, I already am thinking like is this deck going to be top tier competitive? I'm not sure. I have no idea. It might not be. Maybe more cards will be real to make it like really good. But is this deck sounding thematic and really fun? Absolutely.
Yeah. This cards like these, I'm a sucker in any game I play for tribal themes. I love them. I just like the idea of all of my guys, whether I'm playing elves or goblins or category 8 or whatever I'm doing. That already tickles that part of my brain. This card is good soup for that. I really think that this is a great foundation for what they could be doing so far with this kind of kindred, if you will. And again, we have a whole set of cards yet to see, so there's going to be more to add to this. So great rate of return already. Kind of excited to see what more we can add to it.
Absolutely. I'm pumped for more spoilers. There's a bunch of stuff we did not go over today, including some cards that are very, very good as well.
Yes.
We'll be, I'm sure, returning to the subject a few more times before the release of Shadows of the Galaxy. And we have thematically, we have Bad Batch, we have solo content, we have actually some teases of some sequel content as well that may be coming here, which I'm looking forward to. A lot of cute things going on in the Shadows of the Galaxy. So we'll certainly be back and talking about more of those in the future.
Yeah, I'm kind of just excited to finally be talking about something that I'm sure everyone's not going to disagree on about anything that we talked about or get angry about. No, well, I just think, maybe we were wrong on everything. Who knows? We'll find out. But for now, I think that's it. I think we've kind of blabbed enough.
I think so too.
We'll
certainly be back in a couple of weeks though.
Oh yeah. We'll be back in more. We'll have some more. Definitely some cards I'm still really excited to talk about. I didn't even talk about my favorite card, so we'll save that for probably not the next one, but the next time we get a nice, critical mass of spoilers. But yeah, thank you guys for listening to us this week. Again, you, Dan, I really appreciate you allowing me to have the time to do this with you each week. And then for everybody for listening, thank you guys for making this possible. The amount of growth of everybody kind of chiming in and talking about what we're doing and engagement has been absolutely fantastic to see. And I'm glad that we're putting something out there that people enjoy. So yeah, that's it. See you probably in 2 weeks. For Dan, I'm Jason. Thank you for listening to Galactic Ambition, part of the Maindeck podcast family. And I'll see you next time. That's my blasters.
Pew, pew. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bang, pew, bang, bang, pew.
Now it's a bird.